The Chancellor promised that she would not put up income tax, and she's about to put up income tax. She has once again broken her promise, and I can't see how much longer she can cling to her job under such circumstances. It's been a calamity, and it's about to get much worse. I'm Allister Heath, and I will be responding to some of the excellent reader responses to my latest article on Labour's pathological inability to tell the truth about its looming tax increases. We begin with a comment from Mark Haywood. Mark says, "It's only a little bit more tax. I wish people would stop moaning. We have to pay for COVID, our increased NATO fees, and for Brexit damage. It's a situation of our own making." Well, Mark, guess what? I disagree on all of your points. First of all, it's not a little bit more tax. It's massively more tax than what Labour promised. Labour said in their manifesto they put up taxes by £8.5 billion a year and only on a narrow range of items. In reality, at the first budget, Rachel Reeves put up taxes by £40 billion a year, 5 times more than she promised, and she broke all of her promises, including by increasing national insurance when she specifically said she wouldn't. Now, at her next budget, in November, she's planning to put up taxes again by probably £30 to £40 billion a year. So we're now at £80 billion a year in tax increases, 10 times more than what she said she'd do. And once again, Labour is preparing to break all of their manifesto and other promises. They are thinking about putting up income tax, even though they swore blind that they would not put up income tax. And they may well decide to impose some sort of wealth or mansion tax, even though Rachel Reeves told the Telegraph in an interview that she would never do that. So they keep breaking their promises. They keep lying to the electorate, which is very, very bad. Also, by the way, I don't agree that this has anything to do with our increased NATO fees. Those are all coming out of reducing spending on foreign aid, so there's no need to put up taxes. I don't agree it has anything to do with COVID. The debt is already there. There's no new expenditure on COVID, so that's not that. And finally, you say it's also got to do with Brexit damage. Again, it has nothing to do with that whatsoever. This is all about Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer massively increasing public spending at their first budget last year, tearing up semi-responsible Tory plans, and also crippling the economy with a bunch of idiotic taxes and more regulation. So I blame the Labour Party for all of that. It's been a calamity, and it's about to get much worse. The next question is from Robert Quamby, who says, "Most people recognise that there should be a rise in taxes, but only on the basis that A, major reductions in spending must also be implemented, and B, the money raised must be spent wisely. Under this government, it's never going to happen, so we should adopt the French approach and revolt." Robert, I disagree. I don't agree with you that there should be a rise in taxes. I think we should cut taxes. But I agree with you that we should cut spending in a major way and that this is not going to happen. But the real problem here is that the government, not only is the government not going to cut spending, but the problem is they've massively increased spending. Rachel Reeves increased spending by some £70 billion a year in her first budget, and there's going to be even more spending increases that are bound to come through. Why? Because this government believes in a state that must be larger and larger, because it refuses to reform the welfare state. In her very partial defence, the Chancellor actually did want to trim a few £1 billion a year from the benefit bill. Now, that would have still meant a large increase in spending on welfare, just a smaller increase, but at least she was trying. Well, her own party rebelled and defeated her. The message is, under Labour, they're never going to cut spending on welfare. In the meantime, the whole welfare state is spiralling out of control, and we now have some 6.5 million adults on out-of-work benefits, which is a catastrophe and a tragedy. So, this government's out of control. It spends more. Of course, all of that has to be reversed, but I don't think there's any basis whatsoever for putting up taxes. Taxes must go down, not up, and at the very least, the government mustn't break its manifesto promises. The next question is from SJXT, who obviously isn't called that. "So what?" he or she says. "Facts are facts. While welfare commitments in the NHS, pensions, disability field remain what they are, and as Boujol and other columnists here have pointed out, taxes will continue to rise into the future as dependency ratios fall. At some point or other, the great British public needs to grow up and realise If it wants the welfare to continue, it will have to pay higher tax, and if it doesn't like that, it will need to cut welfare. But at the moment, most still want both. So, SJXT, or whatever you're called, well, I agree that under current welfare state commitments, we have a problem. That said, even under current welfare state commitments, we could actually not be spending as much. We could be much tougher on incapacity benefits, for example, that are clearly being claimed by many people who don't need them. Clearly, there's no reason whatsoever why 6.5 million adults should be on out-of-work benefits. Clearly, we could be forcing people who are not currently working to work and reducing immigration as a quid pro quo. There's all sorts of things we could do even under the current welfare state and even the current commitments to reduce expenditure. The NHS will always be badly managed, but it could be better managed than it is. It could be less wasteful. We could extract more bang for our bucks. Productivity in the public sector could be going up at least a little bit, not stagnating or falling as it is under Labour. But yes, long run, I agree with the idea that the current welfare commitments will lead inevitably to our national bankruptcy. So we need to change things. I blame Gordon Brown for ruining the UK-funded pension system, but in any case, younger people need to save a lot more money for their pensions. We need to move towards a system where people actually save for their retirement, not rely on existing workers to pay for their pensions. And we need to completely reform the way we pay for our healthcare in Britain. It shouldn't be the case that we expect all of it to be free. So we need radical changes. We need to use much more insurance. We need to save more. But at the same time, we need to reform the operations of the current welfare state. And on all these counts and all these fronts, the Labour Party has proved to be worse than useless and is now relying on breaking its promises to keep putting up taxes to prop up a failing system. The next question comes from Edward Stevenson. I suspect they will do both the income tax and the mansion tax. The latter will raise no money but is designed to appease their supporters. The income tax rise will need to be to at least 23% to stand any chance of stopping a fiscal crisis. What Rachel Reeves can't see is that the only way to fix this is to stop spending money. And there's two strands to left-wing thinking. There's the populist left, which believes that you can fund an ever larger welfare state just by hitting the rich. And there's a more realistic strand of socialism, which accepts that you need to hammer the entire population, as in France, if you want to keep on increasing public spending. I suspect Reeves will try and triangulate between those two, and hence I agree with Edward. I think she would try and hit the rich, perhaps with some sort of wealth tax or mansion tax, in defiance to what she specifically told she wouldn't do, told us at this newspaper. And secondly, I think she will put up income tax, possibly by 2p rather than 3p. There's even a scenario under which she puts up income tax and cuts national insurance at the same time, which means that the people paying the higher tax wouldn't be workers, but they would instead be pensioners and people who derive their income from non-labour sources, for example, dividends or interest payments. But whatever you do, the fact is simple. The Chancellor promised that she would not put up income tax, and she's about to put up income tax. She has once again broken her promise, and I can't see how much longer she can cling to her job under such circumstances. The next question is from somebody calling themselves Rumpole of the Bee. The last few governments have been rubbish. Sunak was a fool and Starmer's a weak fool. Johnson blew it over Brexit and COVID. Cameron was poor in hindsight. Osborne was a disaster. Blair's policies on education, energy and immigration started the rot. So trying to blame it all on Starmer and Reeves is wrong, but they're the wrong people at the wrong time. I agree with some of this, but not all of it. I'm not blaming Starmer for everything, but Starmer and Reeves inherited a particular fiscal position. What did they do? Did they stick to the Tory plans, which were very tough? No. So of course, they decided to tear it all up and massively increase public spending, maybe by £70 billion a year. So clearly they had to put up taxes, they had to break their promises, so they did all of that. And they thought 40 billion a year would be enough. Of course, it wasn't, and now they're going to have to put taxes up again by another 40 billion a year to stave off a catastrophic fiscal crisis. Is all of that Starmer and Reeves' fault? Yes. Right? They did not have to do what they've done. They could have stuck to the Tory plans. Now, the Tories themselves, of course, were useless, as the reader points out. They themselves had massively increased public spending as a share of GDP and put taxes up to historic heights. But Labour did not have to further compound this problem and turn a disaster into a complete crisis. They did not have to do that, and therefore I hold them responsible for breaking their promises, for having lied to the electorate, having told us over and over again in their manifesto, in public statements, in newspaper interviews, including to the Telegraph, that they wouldn't put up certain taxes, and they are now preparing to put up these taxes and have already put up one, national insurance, which they said they wouldn't. That is all we have time for this week. Thank you to all our subscribers for your comments. Keep them coming, and as always, we will try and respond to as many of you as possible.